Hello, everyone. Welcome to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. On today's show, we're talking about finances for singles. And while there are pros to being single, there can also be challenges, especially when it comes to your finances. So, what is the best way to manage your money as a single person? And how do you safeguard your financial well-being? My guest today has some great insight for you. She's a certified financial planner with 15 years of industry experience, a financial expert who's been interviewed and quoted in publications such as the Globe and Mail and Maclean's Magazine. She is a blogger and also the co-author of the book, The Canadian's Guide to Personal Finances for Singles. Julie Shipley-Strickland, welcome to Money Matters.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shannon. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, before we get into our discussion, can you talk to our viewers a little bit about your background and the inspiration behind your book?
Yeah, so I born and raised in Montreal. Go Habs go. They're in a rebuilding year, just so we're clear on that one. Moved to Calgary in 2006. After finishing at Queen's University, major in finance and minor in accounting. So kind of had that finance itch, right? And my dad was in the business as well, so kind of had a family connection. Started in this business in 2008 in the, the biggest recession, depression we'd seen in a long time. So interesting time to start in my industry, to say the least, but learned a lot. And then moved around to two different firms and joined Wellington Altus Private Wealth in 2019. Which has been absolutely phenomenal. They're fantastic. And so I run my business. I've got my wealth management side, managing client portfolios, working with a lot of business owners in Calgary. And then I've got my risk management side. So that's kind of life insurance, critical illness, disability. So really looking at clients' financial planning needs from a very holistic view for my business, which is great. And then for the book, wrote and published that. It was a big project of 2022 in partnership with Brian, which was phenomenal. He's great. The reason for writing the book, lots of reasons, but look, the biggest one that struck Brian and I was really that there are no resources readily available for navigating the financial landscape when you're single. And, the stats will show you, but in all of our research, it's a growing number. And so, those sorts of areas were really tricky when clients were approaching me and they said, great, Julie, I really like your experience and your intel, but where can I read up on my own or look up on my own? There just wasn't that much available. And so we really thought that this was a bit of a niche where people could have a resource handy. They could look stuff up, see what they wanted to learn and reference it back, right? A handy little book. So it worked out really well.
Well, it sounds like we have a similar sort of background. I also started in the financial industry in 2008. So it was definitely a pivotal time of the sort of financial landscape, if you can put it that way. And I also have a family connection. So I definitely relate to that background. So you're saying the inspiration with the book is you found that there was a hole in the market. It sounds like people just didn't have that resources, especially those who are single or living on their own. There just wasn't enough information out there to help them in that way. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we found a few other books, but a lot of them were really focused on one area. They didn't look at the holistic view. And also with the growing segment, people need a bit of diversity to choose from. And so there was also that. And then a lot were American based. And so, we've got different rules in Canada. So when you're dealing with US tax and that sort of thing. So, between all those three, it wasn't really a comprehensive, nice little resource. The other thing is, look, these financial matters aren't always the most straightforward. And we really wanted to make it clear, concise, and easy read, right? You didn't want to read a chapter and be more confused than when you started. And some of the resources out there definitely were for, a bit more high level or let's say more sophisticated expertise. And we really wanted to target the market of, people are just newly single or bereaved or divorced, or they're just trying to figure things out. Let's give them the easy button on this one, So that was part of it as well. So kind of a lot of pieces fell into place for the book.
Well, it's definitely timely to come out now because according to the most recent census data that's been available, the percentage of the population that is living single has more than doubled since the 1980s. Just a few statistics: the number of people living alone spiked from 1.7 million in 1981 to 4 million in 2016. And singles living alone over the age of 15 went from 9% of the population all the way up to 14% during that same period. Now, the data also reveals that sort of contrary to that popular belief that the biggest age group of people that's living alone isn't young adults. It's actually people between the ages of 35 and 64. And of that group, there are more single men than women. And so, Julie, in writing this book, how did you choose to categorize that term as single?
Yeah, great question. So I'm gonna pause that. Aren't some of those statistics so interesting? I never would have guessed 35 to 64 when I read that. That's just not, I don't know. I don't know what I would have assumed. I've thought about this a few times, but I definitely wouldn't have thought that. So I found these stats really, really interesting. Thanks for sharing those. For single, what we did was we kind of broke it into three categories. So one, chosen single. Those who either have decided to live single, haven't yet found a partner, just want to experience life as a single human. We left that as one. Then we took divorced and bereaved. And that was different because, at one time there was a partnership and now they're single. And so we really had to navigate that change. And typically, what we found was when you went to bereaved, there was obviously a loss, and often it wasn't planned or anticipated, let's say. Divorce was a little bit different beast as well, because sometimes that was a little bit more, it had been a couple of years in the making, or people seemed a little bit more prepared on that front than the bereaved. It's just what we found. So the three of them kind of tied together, but also had to really be analyzed individually, I guess, when we were looking through different rules, regulations, different ideas for these kind of three groups, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, because those three different groups really they're in different stages of life and going through different situations personally as well. And so breaking those up into those sort of different categories makes a lot of sense. Now, there can be some pros, as we know, to living single and sort of the financial challenges that come along with that. One of the positives can be that you are managing your money all on your own. And you don't need to have those serious conversations with another person. You can make those choices by yourself. Are there some other positives to solo living when it comes to your finances?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one, because that one's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword, right, Shannon? Like, you've got this pro of not having to not having to have those discussions. So and often I see this in partnerships, one has experience or beliefs in money this way, and another one has this way, and they have to come together, right? So to not have to do that with anyone could be really helpful, saves time, easier to articulate what you want, and easier to make sure that really the client, from my perspective, is really satisfied with the plan going forward. But on the flip side, there's also no one there to bounce ideas off of, get a different perspective, know you in an intimate financial way where, they can call you out on certain things or keep you in line, right? So there's kind of a double-edged sword to that one. To focus on the pros, I think the freedom is the biggest one. You want to move somewhere for a job, you want to work extra hours, you want to pick up a second job or a second career. All of that flexibility is easy to be done. And then as well, you've got the freedom of how you spend the dollars you earn. So you want to go on 5 vacations a year because your big thing is vacations, or you want to buy that snazzy car, or whatever really drives you can be satisfied, I would say, easier than if you're in a partnership, because of course, then you got to compromise, right? So to me, it's the biggest thing is the freedom. And I guess the sole decision-making would be a pro, because often, and we've all heard this in partnerships, one of the biggest things that might cause angst between the partners is financial, right? So not having that definitely helps for sure.
And of course, we all know with the good comes the bad. So,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about the downside of being single when it comes to managing your own finances?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the biggest one is so obvious. In you've got no one to ask opinions of. Sure, you can hire a professional, absolutely, and I'm happy to give my opinion to any client that asks. But it's not as I don't see them day in day out in their spending habits, and I'm not having discussions with them in terms of day in day out of what they want to save for and grow and that sort of thing. So, I think not having a partner to bounce those ideas off is definitely the challenge, right? And then I often see where one partner is slightly more educated than the other partner. Either that's just interest, upbringing. Sometimes it's just education or school, what type of schooling you went through. And so if you're the partner that's a bit more educated, great, that's helpful. But if you're the partner, maybe let's say, I'm thinking of a great client of mine. She's an artist. She never really was interested in financial matters. And, her and I, we met in 2008. So, she's been a client of mine for a long time. And she really leans on me. She was recently divorced in 2008 and she hasn't partnered with anyone else since then. So she really leans on me for some of that because that's just not how her psyche thinks. And so that sort of thing, I know she's expressed has been a bit of a challenge for her. And it's an example I thought of. So that to me would be probably the biggest con. I mean, I don't know. I guess the other cons would be that you're relying solely on yourself, so you don't have a backup if you have a job loss or an illness or something unexpected happens. So I think that's important to keep in mind as well.
I agree with you that when there is a partnership, there can be perhaps an inequality there. Perhaps one partner has a different opinion on how money should be managed in the family, or maybe has more experience in that area. And there can be sort of differing opinions in that partnership when it comes to making those really important money decisions. And I see it in my line of work all the time as well, where perhaps there are secrets being kept between the partnership and things are going on behind the scenes that are not being shared with each other. And so that can definitely cause, I think, a rift in a relationship. I mean, as we know, money is one of those major causes of stress in a relationship because of those difficult conversations. So I definitely see that the downside of sort of being single in that kind of a situation, of course, is yes, you don't have another person to talk to help make those decisions as well. But sometimes that can also be a benefit too, to have that sounding board.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We're heading into a break, and of course now, if you are living solo or navigating some of these challenges, it can be difficult. And Julie, your book can certainly help with that. Now we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some of those specifics, and Julie is going to have some great information for you when Money Matters returns.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Welcome back to Money Matters with Shannon Jackson. My guest today is Julie Shipley-Strickland, certified financial planner and co-author of the book, The Canadian's Guide to Personal Finances for Singles. And they say timing is everything. And as you heard in the opening segment, the percentage of Canadians living single is on the rise. And so, Julie, your book really couldn't come along at a better time. And before the break, we talked about some of the pros and cons to solo living. And in this segment, I just want to focus on some specifics for our viewers who are watching and who are navigating life on their own. Maybe some tools to help them overcome some of the specific challenges they might be facing when it comes to money management, which you do address in your book. And a huge challenge, of course, is covering those regular monthly housing costs. Now, according to the latest census, close to half of young adults living alone currently have monthly expenses that are considered to be unaffordable. And we certainly know the impact high inflation and rising interest rates are currently having on all Canadians, really, not just singles. So how concerning is it for you to hear a report from Stats Canada that so many people who are living single are just not able to afford their regular monthly housing costs?
Yeah, I mean, the word that comes to mind is just so sad and terrifying. And it's just disruptive, right? Like this isn't where we should be, especially in a country like Canada. So couldn't agree with you more. It's not nice to hear this, so maybe some tips and tricks and some things to keep in mind, right? So first thing that I encourage clients is to live with balance. So make sure that you have not only that emergency fund that you're saving, and the old adage is 3 to 6 months. Look, it's whatever helps you sleep at night. I call it the sleep at night factor, wherever you're comfortable. I've got clients that have a year saved. I've got clients that have a month saved. So whatever works for you is best, but have a nest egg there. The second is having a bit of an opportunity fund. You never know when the opportunity to invest in a friend's business, a new investment, something can come up. So have some cash set aside for that as well. And, these cash instruments right now, they're paying 4 or 5% at most of your major banks and that sort of thing. So you can actually get a little bit of a rate of return and have your money really safe right now, which is great. I would also say focus on your cash flow. Make sure you're not living paycheck to paycheck. And if you are, try and see where you can cut, right? Whenever I do this exercise with clients, I always find that there's places that they hadn't thought of that they can cut. So make sure that's top of mind and look at your money regularly. If you stay on top of it and look at it, you know what's coming in and out. And that's really, really helpful for when you're living in balance. So I think those would kind of be my top 3 as to how to really stay living in that balance and make sure that things are a bit more affordable for sure.
Well, I definitely see people on a regular basis as a licensed insolvency trustee. I meet with people and it's clear by their cash flow that there just isn't enough income coming in to pay those regular living expenses every month. And that's just their basic rent and groceries and gas for the car and a car payment and things like that. Are you hearing similar things like that from your single clients?
Yeah. And I think I'm hearing it all around, right? I'm hearing how high groceries, I mean, I'm seeing it, we go to the grocery store, but even, you want to go out for dinner for a restaurant and, everything's gone up so much. It's better to stay at home and cook at home, right? So you're definitely hearing it from all ends. And I think that's a bit of the issue, right? With inflation spiking so high and now interest rates up so high, not only are food and basic necessities quite elevated, but the inflation hasn't come back down yet. And I get it's on its way down, but it hasn't come down yet. So we're still in this limbo where, the mortgage costs are costing more. And so are maybe any other variable lines of credit or that sort of thing that you had, but we're still paying high prices at the grocery store. So it's really that tight limbo of, we haven't seen it kind of come into check a little bit here.
Well, we all know that having that budget is really critical to managing our own finances. Is there any other tools that single people should be using in order to sort of manage their money on a monthly basis?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to look at your money, know where it's going, right? And really allocate, really focus on cutting where you can. I think that's the key. That's the coaching that I always give clients who are really tight on their budgets is where can you cut? Can you shop at a different grocery store? Can you be more strategic with what you're buying at the grocery store? Even things from not buying fresh berries, buying frozen ones when they're off season so that you get something like even little things like this that might seem minor, but they can keep your grocery bill in check because that seems to be a big one where clients feel like that expense just gets out of control. Little things with gasoline, coaching clients on, do you have to drive everywhere? Can you walk some places? It's out of the box, and it's some of the stuff that Brian and I touch on the book, but it just gives you food for thought, right? And brings it to the forefront of, is this something that can actually help? Budgeting is really important, but I find it a very restrictive word. I prefer to look at something like a balance, right? What's coming in, what's going out, and how do we achieve this balance?
Now, what about debt? Should singles be managing their debt a little bit differently than those maybe who are not single?
Yeah. And, one, I always like to clarify that not all debt is bad. So if it's tied to an asset, if you've got a mortgage that you're paying down every month or every 2 weeks, that's tied to a property, that's actually not bad debt. We want to stay on top of it and make regular payments, but debt kind of gets lumped in that everything's bad, right? So definitely not. And you would see that a lot with your line of work. But two, I think the biggest thing with singles is you're relying on yourself. So for me, that would mean an increased amount of cash available, whether that's in extra savings, whether that's an emergency line of credit, whether that's, family member that you feel comfortable borrowing from, whatever your situation is. I think it's really important when you're single to have the opportunity to find funds from different places if you should need them in a pinch. And so I'm not saying that's not important for partnership, but when there's two people, there's a load that can be shared there a little bit more easily than one person. So that's one thing that I keep at the forefront when I'm planning with my single clients.
And I think too, when it comes to our sort of keeping track of where our money is going, like you were saying before, it is an ongoing process. It isn't, you set your balance, as you talk about, where you know what money's coming in, you know where it's going, but that is sort of an ever evolving document, if you want to call it that, where you are comparing your progress back to that really on a regular basis, monthly at least. And so things are sort of changing all the time where you're keeping track of these things. And I think that you're right, where you want to make sure that you are trying to stay ahead of those things, looking for ways as well to make those small changes. If you're walking someplace, or, maybe you don't stop and get a coffee every day, maybe it's only 3 days a week. There's always those very small adjustments that can be made. That's right. And then you end up where you're now suddenly finding money. And that can be actually exciting as you start to track those things. Yeah. Now, of course, we know life happens. Unexpected things come about. Maybe we get sick, we're not able to work as much, or we're not able to work at all. Maybe we've lost our job unexpectedly, or we've perhaps lost our loved one to illness, or perhaps they've passed away as well. So as a single person, these negative things can really have a huge impact on our financial well-being. How can singles prepare better for these unexpected events?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shannon. I'm sure you see it in your work too, but the number one is just to have that emergency and opportunity fund, right? And the emergency is if something happens that's unexpected, for sure. I like to look at the opportunity fund too. We've got a lot of great opportunities that were presented in our lifetime, and to have some cash available to be able to take advantage of them, it's kind of exciting. It's great for your mental health to be able to do that too. So definitely something to keep in mind. I think the other thing is that, for my risk management side of my business, there's some insurance out there that's pretty valuable. Critical illness protects you if you happen to get diagnosed with an illness. The whole purpose of that solution is actually to bridge you so that you can get back to regular life and working through perhaps your sickness, that sort of thing. And then if you don't use all of that solution during your lifetime, you can get the premiums back that you put in. You've got the opportunity to. So there's definitely some solutions out there that can give clients flexibility and give them a bit of peace of mind without tying up, let's say, all of their cash in something costly or expensive. So I think that's pretty important. I think the last thing is to understand your disability. So if you work and you've got some sort of disability plan, I constantly find clients have never ever looked at their disability. And so it is something to sit down and spend a bit of time at least understanding what happens if you aren't able to work and how do you get compensated, right? And have a bit of a plan around that. I think it's something really important and great peace of mind.
I want to talk a little bit about investing as well, because I think there are ways that people who are living singly or on their own can invest to sort of reach their financial goals. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to investing, it really depends on the individual, right? It really depends on what they're trying to accomplish. I think finding a professional that can help work with you on your short-term and long-term goals is essential. And I think sitting down and revisiting those goals, because similar to the balancing your cash flow and that sort of thing, your goals are going to evolve and change, right? So I think that's very important. I think we've already touched on the cash. So I think that would be kind of my number 2 is the cash. I think number 3 would be get educated. You don't need to be Warren Buffett with investing. You don't, but get a little bit of educated, know at least where your money's going. You know, if it's in different countries, different sectors, have a little, ground zero knowledge of where that is. So you can have that peace of mind and comfort that you know where you're invested and how your money's doing.
Would you say that working with a financial planner would be a benefit to those who are single?
Yeah, I definitely think so. 1, you can bounce ideas off that person, right? So that's a huge value. 2, they can make sure that you're lined up for any tax strategies or any that are focused on singles and or can really benefit you, right? So I think that's really important as well. And I think overall their general knowledge. I mean, I'd make sure that they're a certified financial planner. They understand the advice and recommendations they're giving, but having something tailored to you, I think is really important when you're dealing with your wealth and building it for the future.
Well, there's definitely statistics that say that working with a financial planner, those that do, they're really more on track with their financial goals and their retirement plans. They're able to save more. They have more confidence when it comes to dealing with any kind of financial challenges that come up. So I think there's definitely a benefit to tapping into that resource in order to get that extra insight to help make those difficult money decisions. So I appreciate your opinion about that. Now we're running out of time, but do you have any final thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah, I think my final thing would be to 1, get educated on the spectrum as to what your comfort is, but know something about your money for sure. 2, cash is, I like to say, queen. And so make sure you have some in an emergency fund and or an opportunity fund. I love the opportunity fund. It just sounds nice. And 3, protect yourself. So understand a bit about your disability plan, understand what solutions are out there to protect yourself. I think those would be my 3 tips.
Well, that's really great information. And if viewers want to connect with you or pick up a copy of your book, how can they do that?
Yeah, so the book's available at Indigo and Chapters across the country. So just go to your local one. My Instagram at Wealth with Julie, and that's the best way to follow me. And then my website's my full name, julieshipleystrickland.com.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your expertise with our viewers. We have lots of great takeaways today. And I also want to thank you, our viewers, for watching. Until next time, I'm Shannon Jackson.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.